Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. And keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as, investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy. Alright folks, here we are on Thursday, March 28th. We're going to take a look at CRON today. So I had a few people reach out and ask me to take a look at this stock within a couple of days, so interesting timing, and so I thought I'd come in and do just that. Now I put some levels on the chart that I feel could play, support and resistance levels. I only put on what I felt were the strongest levels currently, which just means that where there's some relatively thin price action in recent days or weeks, that may develop more over time, and there may develop some additional levels in between these ones that I've put in here. So just keep in mind, these are the ones that I feel are currently strongest, and I put in as many as I could without cluttering up the chart too much. So to the nearest in level, so we finished today at 261. 263 was the level that I put in on the chart earlier today. That is actually looking like it might be a pretty critical level for this, at least in the near term. So you see it was having a hard time breaking through in these 3 days, and then a big wick up yesterday, and that got it through the level, and then today came down and kind of is retesting right at that level again. So the question here always becomes, on this retest, is it going to hold? Is it going to bounce? Is it going to lose it and flip it to resistance? And just because it loses it temporarily doesn't mean that it flips it to resistance, right? It could come down and then it could come up for a retest, right? And the question there will be, okay, when it retests, does it confirm resistance or does it come back through? Because if it comes back through, it may just sort of be pinning itself to this level or within a range around this level for some time. So just keep that in mind. But that's why these retests are important, right? This first poke above it and trying to hold it on the next day, and that's where it's slipped down for the time being. So let's see what it does on this retest, but it's pretty good timing to come in and take a look at this chart for that reason. Now, if it does come down, 246, 225, and 197.5 are levels that seem pretty critical to me. These all sort of follow psychological levels, right? Like this will be sort of, is it really going to stay under 250, right? That's sort of, I think, what the psychology there is. Here, 2.25, psychological level. And then here, again, basically the $2 level, saying, okay, if it dips below this 2, are we really going to keep it there, or are we going to bring it back up over 2? Okay. Now, if it does push further, 284, 310, 333, and 366. So this follows a little less of the psychological levels. As 310 is kind of close to 3, but everything else here, I prefer when they're sort of off the psychological levels, because that the psychological levels are there, and then if you have levels that aren't the psychological levels, then you sort of have, additional things to keep track of. So those are the ones that I put in. I don't think I put in any higher. No. So I basically stretched us $1 to the upside, and what is that, about 70 cents or so to the downside. If it blows through either of those ranges, we can come back and take a look if folks are interested. Now, on the think or swim side of things, with this big recent push, which was actually a pretty good call out by the TTM squeeze indicator, we had a trigger and a fire here that didn't really amount to much of anything, and then a very brief re-trigger and refire, and that's when it came in and pushed, and also a good call out by the conviction candle here, which I typically ignore because, like, you see this, right? And you see this also. It throws a lot of false positives, or it throws a lot of signals that don't amount to anything. But for what it's worth, we'll give it its due at the moment. Now, today, with it being so far out of the channel, we did see a lot of sell volume, right? The volume here on this indicator, at least it's showing about 97% sell volume. That's an estimate based on the information available. It's not necessarily the exact number of what was happening, but we'll see if that continues to take shape or if that sort of restructures in the days ahead. We do see as it was pushing out of the channel, it did have one of those days here as well, but it was able at that point to catch support on the upper bound of the channel, which, if you've seen this setup before and seen me talk about it, whenever we get outside of the channel, we look for a couple things. One, when it re-engages with the channel, what does it do? If it treats the upper bound of the channel or even the wave cloud as support, that can oftentimes mean, not always, but oftentimes mean that there's additional momentum to exhaust in that direction. So we saw that here, right? It was catching that support down here around mid twos, and it's, at least for the time being, exhausted momentum in the same direction up to 277. So this is sort of a second test of the upper bound of the channel to see, is it going to sort of treat it the same way again? If it does come in, again, does it sort of treat the wave cloud, which is in the channel for the time being, as support? Sort of a similar kind of hypothesis there. Now, the thing that we ultimately look for it to do is come in and retest the mid-range of the channel, this bright blue line, which right now is situated at 232. This channel is dynamic, so it does shift every time price action gets put in. So if it does continue to jump up, it'll drag the mid-range of the channel, drag the whole channel up with it. So that will be in a different place if that happens. But ultimately, eventually, we always look for out of the channel price action to retest the mid-range of the channel, right? You see that here, it did it just for a few days, lost support, and then came all the way down to the lower bound of the channel. So that's why that's a pretty important moment. But we'll see. Here it did, this is looking eerily similar. Green, red, green, green, red. It's not quite the same as right now, but green, red, green, green, or neutral and red. But we are now, similarly 5 candles out of the channel. If we exclude these guys here that were kind of wrestling with the bound. So I'm wondering, it doesn't have to follow that previous pattern, but we'll see what happens if and when it re-engages with the channel. All right, folks, I hope that your trading week has been going well. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.